Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
In this section, we're going to talk about one of the pages from the WLAN Pros Notebook. This is the page that has a dBm to milliwatt conversion. One of my favorite things to teach, and I have a little thing that's a 5-minute to dB to milliwatt conversion. It's a very simple way to go about and doing it. And I think anyone who's in this industry will be able to think in your mind very quickly the dB to milliwatt, milliwatt to dB, and that should be almost instantaneous going back and forth. But for some of you who might be new in the industry, haven't been going along, we added this little conversion table right here for you. The tricks we use in dB to milliwatt conversion, things like, using 3s and 10s. So a 3 on the left side in dB is equal to a 2 on the right side in normal math. Those tricks work really good, and it's very fast to figure out how to do that. Just realize that when you get up to some numbers, like if you do double, 2, 4, 8, 16, you get up to 512 or 1024. On this table, it shows 1000. That's because the difference between the trick using the dB math trick and the actual logarithm are slightly off. So if you using your tricks and you get a number like 512 and the table shows 500, or you use 500 but 512 is what you've been using, they're still the same. You're not going to get too confused with that. We also added on this page a couple other pieces that I think WLAN pros should know fairly consistently. And the reason we add them here, so when you're talking with customers, sometimes it's easier to show them a graphic. So the state machine is a graphic that you can go and show, and when you're describing the process of how a client does probe request, probe response, authentication request, authentication response, association request, association response, and then it gets into the authentication process later, you can point back and show where there's 802.11 authentication, and there's authentication after 802.11 finishes, and how the state machine works, as well as looking at the disassociation and deauthentication, showing how far back in the process you go depending on what frame is sent. And the third thing we added on this page was the frame control field, specifically for the to-bit and from bit. These little DS bits are very useful, and depending on how they're set, each of the addresses will either be BSSID, the MAC address of the AP, or the station, the source address, the transmitter address, the receiver address, or the destination address. And those are all in a little table there for you to understand. It also shows when you get to the only time you use all 4 of the addresses are if your to-bit and from-bit are both set to 1. If they're both set to 1, then you are in bridge mode or a mesh mode.
Let's get to know our colleagues and friends with a shared passion for Wi-Fi. It's time to search Who Is.
Ferney, welcome to the show, amigo. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Matthew. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. It's been a while since we've been face-to-face.
Yeah.
All right. I guess the last time, I wasn't too far long ago, we were moving boxes around, I think.
That is correct. We were rearranging the lending library and inventory and all kind of things. That's in the office, yes.
And now you just kind of got back from a whirlwind tour with your family, a little different traveling than normal. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I'm usually traveling just for work, either with CWNA classes or ECAHAU classes and or consulting. And this time it was just holiday, just vacation with my family. Well, I have 3 kids. 3, 8, and 9, and traveling with kids can be challenging. We went to Europe, and everything went well, except that I left the passports in a taxi cab in Rome, and we had no passports for a few days, but we got emergency passport. But other than that, it was very good. It's just the same challenges going through airports and security and all kind of the hassle of traveling, but this time without gear, without equipment, and just relax. So yeah, it was pretty good.
Different kind of gear for kids.
Yes, yeah, diapers and bottles and milk and yes,
iPads.
Yeah, yes, right. Absolutely.
For the few that may not know you at all, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you got started in Wi-Fi and kind of what you're up. You alluded to some training, but where are you up to nowadays?
Well, for those who don't know me, I'm Ferney Munoz. Well, they call me Ferney or Rene or something like that. But
Or hey, you.
hey you. But Ferney works. I'm originally from Colombia, and I moved to the States back in '99, March of 1999, and started working at a school district in a high school as a volunteer, doing all the technology stuff. I started with technology many years before that in Colombia, and here I started working directly with networks, and then later I owned the network for the district, big network. Of course, in about 2001 or so, we were working just with mostly wired networks, but
School
started,
district, right?
yeah, school district, yes, started seeing some of the wireless stuff come into play, and then later on, about 2009, we started a new district. That district split off of a big district. It was about 100 schools before, and in the Salt Lake Valley area, the Jordan School District split. And from there, Canyon School District was born, and then we owned that network. We started implementing wireless like big time, removing all of the standalone 802.11b devices and getting rid of difficult to manage. Basically, home devices were installed in the district before, and now we were finally working on an enterprise class network. So I was thrown in the Wi-Fi arena, as many of us where we were on wired networks. And one day somebody said like, hey, we have this wireless thing that needs to be installed or configured. I don't know. And all of a sudden they made us wireless professionals without us knowing what to do. And we started installing zeros, those big flying saucer looking arrays. They're not called access point, they're called arrays, and multiple radios and all kind of challenges with the wireless, of course. We had 50 buildings, about 40,000 students and some 4,000 employees, and we had to provide Wi-Fi for everybody. And in a school district is a very dynamic environment. Everybody's, teachers trying to add curriculum and cool devices to their curriculum, and trying to rely on Wi-Fi, and many just bringing Apple TVs and many just home devices that they want to implement in the enterprise environment, and it all came at once. It's just like
you got thrown in the deep end, and
yes.
You suddenly were a wireless LAN professional.
Yes. Of course, today, like, well, you know how to do it. Like, yeah, I've got Wi-Fi at home. So you know Wi-Fi, then yeah, you're in charge now. And now
exactly.
We had about 650 of these devices implemented in the network, and we were in charge of configuring, making work. Of course, we were having all kind of problems, and when we had issues, the company, they sent an engineer and they walked around with a computer and gear and stuff, and then they gave us a green map at the end, but we still had issues.
Yeah.
And through that process, I just got tired of kind of being held hostage by vendors.
Yeah.
And
say, hey, what do you got there? Let me do this myself.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? We have a big environment, we have budget, and we cannot just schedule an engineer to come whenever they can when we need him now. So it's like, let's do it ourselves. And through that process, we met Mr. Keith Parsons. That's how I met him, is that he was hired to come and help us. Of course, we worked with a gentleman, Jared Griffith, before, and he kind of met Mr. Parsons and brought him on board, and he helped us. And that's how I started basically doing Wi-Fi. Before, I was just kind of like trying to figure it out with my team. And finally, with Mr. Parsons, they kind of show us how to do it ourselves and understand it. And I got some training from Air Magnet, and got some CWNA
so you
training.
Just kind of started jumping in there and learning all you could. Well, one of the purposes of this interview and kind of this series of interviews is obviously taking experience from guys who have been in the trenches and sharing that with obviously your peers and your colleagues, but also people maybe who are getting started in wireless LAN. And so I was thinking of some questions that might be able to help us with that end in mind. And one of those is, if you could go back to your younger self, thinking about kind of when you got started here, like in the story, what's a piece of advice you'd give yourself then that might have helped you avoid some of those headaches along the way?
Oh, without a doubt, if I could go back to the first instant they say like, hey, you're going to be in charge of this wireless network, I would say like, okay, I need training. Just,
Okay.
don't assume that because it works at home, I can do it here in the school district. Why not? I mean, and everybody has that mentality that like, how hard can that be? I mean, just plug it in and it works. And that's one of the problems with Wi-Fi, that it works. It always works. It just works poorly. And we were just putting out fires that we had no idea how to approach it. So getting training would have definitely made our
So
lives
right
easier.
away, just say,
Yeah.
okay, I need training. Just jump in there and
Yes,
do it.
absolutely. And some companies are proactive because many of my students have been in class and they are like, well, I was the cable guy, and then now the wireless guy left, and now they want me to start doing this, but they send me to get training. So those
Yeah.
are easy to work with because they have nothing, no knowledge, and you start from scratch. But others like us that were thrown in the field with no knowledge, just with the responsibility, we start figuring out how to configure the controllers and how to make
Yeah.
this work and how to enable and disable things. And we know how to do it, but we don't know why, or we don't know if it's performance it's supposed to, until something blows up. And so definitely training. And
Training.
CWNA is a very good vendor neutral training, because that's another thing I found out, Matthew, is that a lot of guys, they come from Cisco backgrounds, they come from Aruba backgrounds, and they have all kind of certifications and training from that vendor. Once you start getting to like the basics of the technology, not the brand, is like, wow, this is totally different. Different
So obviously, if you have
perception.
access to those trainings and certifications, take them,
Oh
but
yes,
don't
absolutely.
just stay there.
Absolutely. Don't just think that because you got a Cisco certification in wireless, you're a wireless expert. No, it just it just doesn't end there. It just, there's
Well,
more to it.
what's one thing you think you did right early on as you started in working with Wi-Fi?
Um, I think was admitting that I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I kind of knew. I mean, I thought I knew how it worked because some basics that we had. But later on, when I met Mr. Parsons and we took some like formal training and real training, is when we started realizing that we were doing a lot of things wrong. But I think the first approach is just kind of being humble and say like, you know what, I don't know it. I think that's the hardest step. Because of course
Yeah.
you're a professional, you're in the field, and you're in charge of it.
And
Sure,
you
of
do
course,
know a
that's
lot, probably.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Well, yeah, and I mean, a lot of these guys there, they have knowledge about servers, they have knowledge about virtualization, they have knowledge about networks, wired networks, switching, routing, and a whole bunch of. I mean, these guys are super smart, but Wi-Fi is just a different monster.
Yeah.
It just works differently, and also I've come across guys that come from the cellular networks, from
Okay.
LTE and all this stuff, and they also think, oh yeah, of course I know what, I've been doing this for many years. And then when you start talking about Wi-Fi, it's like some things just don't make sense. It's like, wait, this is not how it works in cellular. Like, exactly, Wi-Fi is just different.
And
And
you mentioned CW&E and the whole gamut of those. Is that the certification you kind of recommend for everybody, or is there a path you recommend
yeah,
that
well,
everyone should
for
go
those
through?
who are not familiar with the CWNP program, uh, starting with CWNA is definitely the beginning. If you want
Okay.
to continue walking this path, and then that's a certification. You can study on your own. You can take a formal class, a CWNA class, and then the certification. You have to go to one of the Pearson View testing centers and you get certified, and you pass, then you get that certification. And then there are three other certifications you have to do. That's the CWSP as the security one, the AP, which is the analysis professional,
Mhm.
and also the DP, which is design professional. They don't have to be taken in that order, but I would recommend taking like CWNA, then AP, then SP, and
Okay.
DP. or DP. Some guys take it out of the way after the ECHO class because a lot of the stuff in there is included. But once you take those 4 certifications, you submit an application to the CWNP, CWNE board. There are a couple of boards that will evaluate it. You have to do some essays and write some stuff, and they will evaluate it, and you have to do blogging. I mean, the listeners who are not familiar with the program, they can just research and find out exactly what they have to do. But it's that's definitely the way to get it. And once you get approved, then you become a CWNE, which is like at the expert level. Okay. Which, by the way, that doesn't make you an expert. You just get the certification, and once you get there, it's like
just the beginning, as you've said, I think in the past before. So, kind of along this train of thought, what does investing in yourself as a WLAN professional mean to you? Is it just certifications? When someone says you need to invest in yourself as a WLAN pro, what does that look like?
For me, in my case, with the school district, there are certain limitations and politics involved and policies that, if you're going to go to this conference, you have to apply within 30 days and it cannot be out of the state. And, the school district is not going to pay for certain things and they will not pay for others. So it's kind of complicated. And one of the challenges I faced when I wanted to attend the first Wireless LAN Professional Conference was that I didn't get the school district to pay for it, either travel or attendance or days off or anything. So investing in myself at that point, I had to make a decision. It's like, okay, the conference is $2,000. I'm going to have to take a week off that I'm not going to get paid for. It's family vacation days that I could use with them somewhere having fun, or just go and go to a conference. Paying for all this stuff at that point was a decision I made. And yes, later then it was the certification that the district did pay for the class, and then I had to take the exams and stuff. But I think investing in yourself for me was not only making the investment that I have to pay this money from my own pocket. No company's paying for it. Nobody's sponsoring me. Although later I got sponsorship from Wireless LAN professionals themselves. That I got a kind of a scholarship to go to the second conference, and that's how I ended up working now for Wireless LAN professionals, doing some of the stuff for them and ECHO and doing just independent contracting. But it was also the effort. It's just the time you put into it. That's just an example. The other one was when taking the certification of the exams. Mm-hmm. I mean, studying for the exams. Investing in myself meant that I had to wake up at 4 a.m, study for a couple hours, then go to work. Then after work, I had to come home, help with the kids and stuff, and study some more. And then my lunch break, just grab something to eat really quick and study more and study more. So at that point, I was not investing money. I mean, I had already purchased the book and I was studying on my own, but it's just that extra effort that, instead of watching a show, you're sitting down, reading a book and making research to understand a concept. Mm-hmm. And also another thing. So there's the paying for yourself by yourself to go to conference and exams and classes and stuff. That's one. The effort that you have to make to achieve these certifications and learn it, because it's not just.
It's almost like no one cares about your future more than you at all, except for you. And so it sounds what I'm hearing is there's this point in time where you make a very clear decision, like this is worth whatever it takes.
Yes. And then absolutely. And then on top of that, because I've come across many guys that they're not working for anybody. So you don't have that playground to learn the actual stuff. Because taking the exam and passing the certification can be simple for some guys. They're like, oh yeah, I read it and then I go and the exam is based on what I read. So yeah. And then they have the certification, but experience is the biggest one, Matthew, because the exam is the exam, but the real thing, getting the experience out in the field is the difficult thing if you don't have an environment. I was lucky enough that we had the school district, and it's not that was my playground, but that was my day job that I had to make work efficiently. So I had a real environment to apply.
What about labs? Investing in lab. I hear Keith talk a lot about that. We've got the lending library and those kind of things. Why is that important, and how do you do that?
Yes, thank you. And that's the next. That's thank you for the segue, because that's my next point. That if you don't have an environment to to apply the knowledge in the real environment, then you have to build a lab, and that implies buying some equipment. And yeah, we have a wireless LAN Pros, the LAN library, where people can just get like enterprise class equipment that they can play with and configure it and wipe it clean without affecting users and work environments. So it's really, really necessary to have a lab environment. Now, here's the other thing that you can do also. If you don't have a real environment and you don't have the means to get your hands on on enterprise equipment, is volunteer. That's a huge investment, because approaching somebody in the field, so it's been like, hey, if you're going to do a survey, can I just kind of shadow you, go there with you, and you don't have to pay me? Because that's what there's there are a lot of people that are like, yeah, you can come with me, but there can be company policies that you cannot just bring somebody off the street with you. If they get hurt, who's liable for it? The company where you're doing the survey, or us doing this? I mean, it's just not as simple as that. But if you come across somebody that, hey, I'm going to do an installation, you want to come? Like, sure, I'll help you pull cables. I'll help you mount APs, or show me and I'll help you configure them. Or just volunteer. Volunteering, I think, is one of the greatest things that I've done throughout my career, not just on Wi-Fi, but on networks and on computers and servers and stuff, just volunteering. But again, that's another thing that has to be aligned right, because you have to get the right people, the right environment. And if you have a daytime job, then you have to make sure you can make it work around your schedule. So that's another big investment, but another nice way to obtain knowledge.
Yeah. And something that's worth doing, worth the sacrifice, it sounds
absolutely like. Absolutely. And I know it's so much easier just go home and sit down and watch a show, or go to a swimming pool, or do nothing. I mean, doing nothing is fun, but it's just, sometimes you have to sacrifice that.
Yeah. Hey, on a different kind of angle, just some other questions here is, what's a mistake in the industry you see people making on a consistent basis that you wish you could stop from happening?
Well, let's see.
You're teaching a lot. Is there things you're running into that people just aren't thinking about?
Well, I think the first one that comes to mind is the installing APs in hallways is one thing that I see commonly being done, that it just doesn't work that well in Wi-Fi. There are many reasons why. There are blogs, lots of blogs out there, kind of explaining why. That's a very common problem. Sometimes it's not because people don't know that that's bad. It is because they're told to put them there. And that's one of the big mistakes I see that I see overall in the industry, is that we as Wi-Fi professionals are being told by engineers and architects and interior designers where and how to mount our access points. So that's I would say that's the biggest thing, because of course if they end up in a hallway, that's a subset of somebody told me to put them there.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. They said put them there because that's the only way they have access, because they look pretty in there, because they don't want them blinking lights inside this room or that room, or because by code they cannot have them in certain areas, industrial areas, wet area. I mean, there are so many things, but to summarize that, the biggest mistake is that we are letting others to kind of tell us how to design Wi-Fi. And another kind of related to that is that a lot of deployments are being done without a design and without doing all of the research to know why we're installing them that way. Many networks, including my own, sometimes they had to, they were deployed. They were just installed by somebody because that's what they said. And then there's no design process. Nobody sat down to figure out why and where and how many devices and what type of devices, for how long we're going to have these, and ask all the questions we have to ask when we're creating a wireless network or deploying a wireless network. So the deployment without design and the research.
Well, it sounds like with this podcast and a lot of the other great podcasts on wireless LAN and the conferences, we're hopefully moving the needle on some of that stuff and educating and encouraging each other, and better testing gear, Sidekick, those kind of things that help prove the need to do things properly.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Well, what is one project you have been involved with that you're the most proud of, and why?
Well, there were several within the school district, which is the network I owned. I worked on other networks for other places, but this is the biggest one. And I think one of not the biggest project, but one of the projects that kind of makes me proud that I had the knowledge I had was some wireless links we had to do for a school. There was a school that was being demolished. That school was across the district office where we were, and the transportation and warehouse for the entire school district, transportation department and warehousing, they were connected through that school that was being demolished. We got quotes from companies to get another line run to that transportation from the district office, and they came to $70,000-$80,000 to run a new fiber cable over there, and because they had to go across the street, and they needed city permits, and they needed, it was just complicated, long, and difficult. It was $80,000, and I got that done like with under $5,000 with a wireless link that brought that entire department and those two buildings and facilities. Very critical, of course, in a school district. Transportation needed to be connected all the time, warehousing as well. And so that was one of the little projects that kind of like, see, wireless actually works and saves the district money. And we had another
a lot of money.
Yes, a lot of money. And we had another similar project where we had to build a school in between two buildings, and with wireless, thanks to the knowledge in wireless, kind of got done for a fraction, like literally a fraction of the cost and the time, because some places we had to trench in the winter and we had to wait for the temperature and the equipment and the permits and everything to be in place. And with wireless, it's like boom, one side, the antenna goes up, the other one, and boom, like within half a day we had a whole building connected. So that's one of the things.
And everyone was shouting, Ferney, Ferney.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that,
except the contractor that wanted to do it.
Yeah, exactly. They were, you had to hide out for a while.
Yeah.
Call your Colombian friends. Yeah. All right. On the flip side of that, what's a mistake you've made that has really taught you something valuable?
Oh man, I've made so many mistakes that I do not know which one would be the most significant. But and you know what? I think here's one. Now that you bring it up, I took the first CWNA class and the air magnet class from Mr. Parsons. It took me like 4 years to actually get certified. Big mistake, because you take the class, it's 4 days, 5 days, and you're there like from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. At the end of Friday, your brain is just overwhelmed with Wi-Fi knowledge, and you have all that stuff fresh in your head. Big mistake I made. I'll take the exam when I'm ready. You're never going to be ready, because there's so much to it. There's so much there, and postponing it was the big mistake. And then later I took the class again. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to study, and then when I'm ready, like never ready. So if I could undo that one after the first class, the day of the end of class, I should have gone and take the exam, or the morning following that.
Yeah.
So that was one mistake, and that would have saved me a lot of hassle, and I would have made my CWNE process probably easier.
Great. Okay, a couple more questions here. Favorite piece of equipment you're using these days, and why?
Oh, without a doubt, the Sidekick.
I thought that's what you said.
Yeah, the Sidekick. It used to be my my air check. That was pretty useful, and I think I still have it. And of course, I think every wireless LAN professional should have an air check in their tool bags. But the Sidekick definitely has changed the way in which I do surveying and analysis, and the analysis of networks. So I'll tell you why. Doing surveys, we have to carry USB hubs, and we have to cables connect to it, and we have wireless NICs, and we have spectrum analyzers, and we have to carry a 2.4 and a 5 gig one. So we had all this bunch of little bits and pieces connected to our computers, which you've seen in videos of the survey tray, how troublesome that can be to just carry around your computer with a whole bunch of little gadgets hanging around the computer. So the Sidekick summarizes all that into one piece of equipment. And using that for surveying was really good. We had a big project in Silicon Valley. We surveyed like 68 kilometers. That's about 42 miles. We had to survey for multiple days. And with the Sidekick, I just had in a backpack and outside of the backpack, because that thing gets really hot and you don't want to have it inside anything when you were using it. And on a Segway, I will say that I used to kind of not be a friend of the Segway because, like, well, I can walk. I like walking, and I think
Yeah.
But when you're doing 42 miles, Segway was the way to go. That'll be my second favorite tool if you ask me. But
maybe that should be our next bundle for Nay. Is a Sidekick
yeah.
with a
Get
Segway.
a Segway as well, and it pays off. It was and actually I didn't have to buy a Segway. I rented one from one of these because there are nowadays pretty much throughout the world. I think in the major cities and tourist places they have these Segway tours. So I called one of these places and I rented one. It was like $100 a day and like $300 a week. I rented for a week and I only used it like 3 or 4 days, but that was it. And just rented. We do have some special equipment to attach the survey tray and put the computer on top. And then you still have one cable going from the Sidekick to your computer, but it simplifies that. So that's my favorite tool nowadays.
All right. Related to that, what's an unexpected tool in your toolkit that you always go to that maybe someone might be surprised to know? Just a little favorite piece of equipment or something that you rely on that maybe is out of the norm of what you normally think of?
Oh, okay. I would say that there are a couple. Since I've done several of the point-to-point links out there, just connecting buildings wirelessly and avoiding running cables. One tool that is kind of like not expected, as you asked, is the a range finder. It's like a binocular, but it's just one lens. So how do you call that? Unicular? I don't know, but it's just one lens.
Telescope.
A telescope. Here we go. It's a small one. It's like the size of I don't know, like a small box. And then you look, and then that will give you the distance that it's used for hunters. And military also use some of those. You look at a spot, and then you press a button, and it will show you the distance from where you are to that point that you selected, and show you the angle of elevation. Like if it's 5 degrees up or down, and then you go to the other end, and then you aim, because when you're doing point-to-point connections, you need the antennas to be aligned, aiming at the same direction, so they see each other. So, of course, like if you're doing a light, you can see the light, but when we're talking about Wi-Fi, we cannot see these waves in the air, so we have to rely on tools like this to give us distances and angles of elevation and inclination to aim our antennas right. Along with that,
do you have a favorure one? What's the brand of that one that you're using?
It's a Lupul, or I don't even know how to pronounce that.
That's right.
But it's you just go to a hunting store and get like a rangefinder, just a one lens device, and there are different ones. They will show you there are multiple brands, and you just have to find one that fits your budget, and that's what you want it to do. Some like the one I have goes like to 1,000 meters. That's about 300. Let's see. 1,000 meters. How many? Well, that's a kilometer. There's like 0.6 miles, like more than half a mile distance, which is pretty decent for a point to point that it will make your life easier. Along with that, there is a tool that goes on iPhone. It's a piece of software that you can also do cool things. It's called Theodolite. It's a THEODOLITE.
Okay, the Autolite. Theodolite.
It's just one word.
Okay.
And let me spell that again for you. It's THEODOLITE.
All right, and I'll get that in the show notes.
Get in the show notes, and also the same application for Android is called Dioptra. DIOPTRA. So those tools will make those type of outdoor installation point to points easier.
Well, awesome. Ferney, thank you for spending time and answering these questions. If people want to follow you, how can they get in touch with you or keep up with all things
the
Ferney?
easiest way will probably be through Twitter at Ferney _Munoz. Add that to the show notes because my name is not easy to understand just in English. Makes sense in Spanish. And I opted that when I go to places to order food, like what's the name? Like
What's your name,
John
sir?
or Fred or something that they don't ask me. Like, how do you spell that?
Todd.
With an R? Yeah, something like that. So because Ferney _Munoz is on Twitter. That's the easiest way. And I also use WhatsApp. People can reach me out that way as well. And that's just my phone number, 1-801-618-8712. And WhatsApp is another easy way for people to reach me anywhere where I'm at. So those will be the ones.
Well, thanks again, Ferney, and you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, Matthew, for having me, and I appreciate all your time also.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.